Thank you, Curtis. That was great. What an incredible document. It was a powerful document that told King George that we, the people of the United States of America, were claiming our freedom and our independence from Great Britain. It was our Declaration of Independence. And in that document, these men pledged not only their own, but their lives of their family and themselves and their fortune and their sacred honor. They had already been at war for a year, and they had started another war which continued on for 8 more years. In those United States where the war was with the most powerful country in the world at the time. They owned the sea, and if they wanted land, they took it. But in the end, the United States of America won its independence and freedom. What kind of men were these 56 men that signed this document? They adopted the Declaration of Independence, and who, by signing, were committing an act of treason against the king. To each of you, the names of Franklin and Adams, Jefferson, Hancock, they're just common. You know, we know them. We know everything about them. But there are many others. Most of us do not know them. Who are they? What happened to them? Of the 56 signers, 46 of them were born in these United States. There were 8 that came from Scotland and journeyed over here from Scotland, Wales, and England. Of the 56, 9 were farmers, plantation owners. 24 were lawyers and jurists. 11 were merchants, and 12 were doctors, ministers, and politicians. Ben Franklin was the oldest at 70 years of age. Edward Rutledge was 26 from South Carolina. He was the youngest. The majority were in their 30s and their 40s. These were men of means. They all had a great deal, with the exception of Samuel Adams. All were well educated. Each had more to lose from a revolution than it had to gain. These men knew what they had risked, because the penalty for treason was death by hanging. And remember, the great British fleet was anchored in New York City Bay, and they had strongholds all around America. So when they signed those names to the Declaration of Independence, a number of them's hands were shaking, needless to say, but their hearts were strong. And as Ben Franklin noted with added emphasis, said, "Gentlemen, we indeed must all hang together, because otherwise we shall most assuredly hang separately." I know it's hard to put yourself in their situation, but what I would ask you to do for the next few minutes is to look around at the men standing and the men sitting and the wives and the children running around, and assume for the moment that those are the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. When these people were signing the Declaration, they knew that they were for taxes with representation that were being forced on them by the king. It was taxation with representation that they sought, not simply taxation without representation. With the list of names going down, it was read the following day, and the British charged every member of Congress suspected of having put his name on the document with treason. Remember, not all colonists liked what they were doing. They did not want independence. So, owing allegiance to the king, they put the word out of who signed it. All of them became the objects of vicious manhunts. All who had property or families near British strongholds most assuredly would suffer. In New York, Francis Lewis saw his home plundered and his estates completely destroyed by the British soldiers. Mrs. Lewis was captured and went through great brutality. Though she was later exchanged for 2 British prisoners, she died from the effects of her abuse. William Floyd was able to escape with his wife and children, who lived as refugees without income for 7 years. When they came home, they found their estate in ruins. Philip Livingston had all his great holdings in New York confiscated and his family driven out of their home. He died in 1778, still working in Congress for the cause. Lewis Morris, the 4th New York delegate, saw all his timber, crops, and livestock taken. For 7 years, he was barred from his home and his family. John Hart of Trenton, New Jersey, risked his life returning home to see his wife dying. While his wife lay on her deathbed, the British soldiers ruined his farm and wrecked his homestead. He, at 65 years of age, slept in caves and in the woods as they hunted him down. He then snuck to his home to find that his wife had already been buried, and they had taken his 13 children away, which he never saw again. He died on 1779, a broken man. Judge Richard Stockton, another New Jersey delegate signer, rushed home to evacuate his wife shortly after signing. He was thrown in jail and was starved. Later, he returned home to find his estate looted and did not live to see the victory. His family was forced to live off of charity. Robert Morris was a merchant in Philadelphia. He met Washington's appeal for money year after year after year. He made and raised arms and provisions which were used in Washington's crossing of the Delaware at the Trenton. And in the process, the man lost 150 ships, bleeding his own fortune and credit almost dry. George Clymer, Philadelphia, escaped with his family from their home, but their property was completely destroyed by the British. John Morton, a Tory in his views previous to the debate, lived in a strongly loyalist, in other words, they were loyal to the king, area, and he was remembered not only a colonist to favor independence. When he came out in favor of that, most of his friends and family ostracized him. But in 1777, his last words to his tormentors were, "My signing of the glorious service that I rendered to my country." William Ellery, Rhode Island, saw his property and home burned to the ground. And Edward Rutledge, the youngest, Arthur Middleton, and Thomas Hayward, 3 of the South Carolina signers, were taken prisoner. Meanwhile, the British completely destroyed their large holdings and estates. Thomas Nelson, signer of Virginia, led military forces and raised $2 million for the cause by pledging his own estates. When the loans came due, he was unable to pay and his property was forfeited. He died impoverished a few years later at the age of 50. And finally, there was the New Jersey signer, Abraham Clark. His 2 sons, officers in the Army, were captured and treated with special brutality because of their father. With the end of the war in sight, the British offered his sons if he would recant his story and come out in favor of the king. Clark's response, with a broken heart, was no. Of those 56 who signed the Declaration of Independence, 9 died of wounds or hardships during the war. 5 were captured and imprisoned, in each case with brutal treatment. Several wives, sons, and daughters were lost. Their entire families were lost, and 1 lost 13 children. 2 wives were brutally treated. All were at one time or another the victims of manhunts and driven from their homes. 12 signers had their homes completely burned, and 17 lost everything they owned. Yet with all this, not one defected or went back on his pledged words. Their honor and the nation they sacrificed so much to create is still intact. Remember, freedom is never free. It was principle, not property, that had brought these men to Philadelphia. 2 of them became president of the United States. 1 became a vice president. 7 became governors, and many of them became senators from the various states. So today, we celebrate America's 235th birthday. While this weekend most of us were out with family and friends enjoying dogs and hot dogs and hamburgers and the like and fireworks, I would ask that you would just take a couple of minutes to appreciate and be thankful for our freedom and liberty that we enjoy as a result of the efforts of so many that have gone on before us. And Ronald Reagan, I always like to leave something with Ronald Reagan, said, "Freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend the sunset years of our life telling our children and our children's children that it was what it was once like in the United States when men were free." I wish you a great and happy 4th of July. God bless America.